In 2 miles, take exit 19 for Valley Park Drive South. Siri chirped from my sister's phone. Charlotte, turn that off. I know where I'm going. You sure about that? I mean, it has been a couple of decades, Mark. Please. Like I could ever forget where Adventure Valley is. Come on. We spent every summer of— There it is! I swerved briefly into the oncoming lane as Charlotte thrust her arm in front of my face to point excitedly out the window. There's Adventure Valley! Oh my god, what ride is that? That coaster. It was called Steel something, right? No, wait. That's Mayhem Mountain, isn't it? I gently pushed my sister's arm out of my face and back over to her seat. I couldn't fault her for her excitement while I was trying so hard to control my own giddiness. It felt like we were kids again, yelling and bouncing in the backseat of my parents' car as the first shining rails and the wooden planks of the park's roller coaster came into view above the treetops. That's Steel Viper, I told her. Mayhem Mountain's on the other end of the park. And that wooden coaster over there is the Excalibur. Oh yeah, I remember those. I was always too much of a wuss to ride the Viper, but I rode the shit out of the Excalibur. Well, Charlotte, you're an adult now. I think it's time to take on the Viper. As long as the contractors have tested it and given it the okay, I'm in. That was really the question, wasn't it? We didn't know which rides had been inspected and cleared and which ones hadn't. I sent up a silent prayer that Mayhem Mountain was counted among the rides that had. I'd left Brandon several voicemails asking about it since he was the one in charge of everything. But with how fast things had been moving since we'd bought the park, I couldn't fault him for being a busy man. If you'd told 12-year-old me that my crazy, hyper, wild-eyed friend Brandon Decker would end up graduating cum laude from Northwest Business School, I would have laughed in your face. Brandon? No way. Tyler? Maybe. But never Brandon. In fact, half the reason I think he chose a business designation was because of Adventure Valley. When the park had closed in 1989, Brandon had gathered us all together in his basement and, with a gravitas and solemnness I've never seen him before or since, he asked us to make the pact. At the time, the promise had been the most serious vow that 5 12-year-olds could ever make. High off an entire summer of Adventure Valley fun, we agreed, with all the ceremony of a meeting of Parliament, that we would one day come together and buy Adventure Valley Amusement Park. Of course, back then we'd planned to just buy it and ride the roller coasters into the ground. We decided which friends from school we would let in and which enemies would be barred from the gates. It had always been our park, and it was only right that we should have it. It had taken 20 years, but we eventually did fulfill our promise. With a hell of a lot of pushing from Brandon, and a sizable offer of collateral from Tyler, the bank had agreed to give us the multi-million-dollar loan to buy, repair, refurbish, and reopen the park. The size of the loan that the 6 of us were responsible for gave me nightmares for several weeks. How would this place ever turn into a profit? It had been closed decades ago after operating in the red for several years. The county had experienced a high number of runaways and missing persons in the area in the last years of the 1980s. The entire region was on edge as the cases mounted and people in the area became depressed and suspicious of each other. It had absolutely killed park attendance. but seeing the first cresting waves of roller coaster rails through the trees made me all but forget about my financial worries. This was Adventure Valley, for Christ's sake. If we opened the gates, people would come. There, that's our exit, Charlotte squeaked. I pulled off the interstate and took a left under the bridge. Less than a mile later, we came upon the acres of the park's parking lot to our right. We turned in and drove all the way up to the front, near the gates where several other cars were parked. A Lexus, a Mini Cooper, and an old Chevelle and a Honda Civic. Another rental car like ours. Looks like we're the last ones here, Charlotte said. She was right. As we pulled up next to the Lexus, I noticed a group of people standing next to the ticket booth, waving to us excitedly. Oh my god, is that Tyler? Jesus, he's lost some weight. He's so skinny now. And Brendan's losing his hair. Holy shit, is that Koji? Koji got hot. Calm down, Paris Hilton. These guys are my friends. They're off limits to you. Same rules as when we were teenagers. Besides, half of them are married. Really? Which half? I raised an eyebrow at Charlotte and shook my head in amused bewilderment. My little sister had never outgrown her boy craziness. Wait, who's that? Charlotte asked as we got out of the car. What? That's Scott? You know Scott? Not Scott. Scott looks exactly the same. The girl next to Scott. Oh. I had put this off so long that I'd actually forgotten to tell my sister at all. That's Danny, Scott's girlfriend. Danny, as in Danielle Bircher? Well, yeah. My sister gave me such a horrified look that you'd think I'd betrayed her to death. But it was fleeting and quickly replaced by a sly smile. Fine by me. I'm sure she's not the same person she was in high school. We're all adults now, right? Come on, let's go. A sigh of relief escaped my chest as I slammed the car door and followed Charlotte over to the entrance. Though I saw most of these guys every year, seeing us all here together standing at the ticket booths of Adventure Valley brought me a sort of happiness I hadn't experienced in many years. Mark fucking Lantis, I can't believe it. Tyler had an edgy, commanding voice that probably made his many employees shudder and scatter. But I knew him like a brother, so his bravado just made me laugh. Can you believe it? I asked him as I gave him a hug and a slap on the back. Back at the front gates. $15 a day doesn't seem so ridiculous now. Pfft, $15 a day, my ass, Brandon said as he shook my hand. By my math, it looks like we'll be charging about $65 a day. I'll pay it, Charlotte smiled as she gave Koji a hug. Are people really going to pay $65 a day? Koji asked. Even Disneyland only charges $85 a day and you get access to 2 parks. How could I forget? Brandon shook his head. One of our investors works for the mouse. Pity they won't let you design any artwork for this place. Come on, man, I'm not an artist. I'm an engineer. Don't you mean Imagineer? Charlotte winked at him. Koji sighed and shook his head. Yeah, I fucking do. As Brandon and Charlotte teased Koji, I made my way over to the side of the ticket booth where Scott and his girlfriend were conversing. I don't know why Scott was being so standoffish, but I thought it might have something to do with the investment. Scott, the least well of all 6 of us, worked at his dad's collision shop and hadn't a whole lot of money to invest. I thought maybe he was embarrassed about the money, but now, watching him lean against the booth with slowly shifting eyes, I realized it wasn't that at all. Scott was just stoned. Same old Scott. What's up, Burnout, my brother? I haven't seen you in like 15 years. How about a bro hug? Scott smiled and pushed it off the wall to come give me a quick hug. Hey, how's it going, man? Fuck, look at you. What, your diet, man? Rabbit food and lettuce? You're not gonna get any ladies with that skinny body. Your mom doesn't seem to mind. Hey, Mark, I'm Danny. Do you remember me? Danny Bircher? Scott's girlfriend gave me a shy smile and stuck out her hand so we could engage in a stiff handshake. Yeah, I think so. You were in my sister's class, right? Charlotte Lantis? Danny had the decency to look embarrassed. Yeah, but we weren't really friends. That's putting it lightly, I thought. We were freshmen when you guys were seniors, she added. Yep, I do remember that. Maybe I should just get it over with. I called Charlotte over and the reintroduction of the two girls, while awkward, was over pretty quickly to everyone's relief. We were all eager to get into the park. It was odd not stopping at the window for tickets, and even odder to walk around the rusting turnstiles of the front gates. I delighted in reminding myself that we own this place now. Brandon gave us a quick tour of the park. Now so much of the geography. We all knew that inside and out, but of the hypothetical layout and reorganization of the park as he saw it. The Excalibur is going to need the most amount of work, according to Rich, Brandon's head contractor. A roller coaster made of wood exposed to the elements for all these years. We'll keep as much of the original structure as is safe, but we might have to rebuild most of it. Do we have the money for that? Scott asked loudly from where he walked behind us with Danny. Yeah, Tyler said. We have the money for that. Ah, Mr. Moneybags. That mini dealership treating you good? I nudged him hard with my shoulder. Tyler stumbled, but kept enough composure to push me back into a passing churro stall. Those 6 BMW dealerships are treating me very well. Well enough to serve as the sizable collateral we needed, Brandon added. So, Charlotte ran up behind us and threw her arms around Tyler and Koji. Can we ride some rides? Are you kidding? Why do you think we're here? Tyler laughed. I'm just here for Mayhem Mountain, I said, clapping my hands and rubbing them together eagerly. Brandon threw up his hands. All right, fine. I thought you guys would be interested in how your investment is coming along. Koji snorted. All we're interested in this project is ROI, and, more importantly, which rides have been past safety inspection. Oh, Brandon stopped walking and tried to look annoyed, and failing that, he smiled. A little over half of them are rideable. Suddenly, everyone was talking at once. Is Steel Viper open? Yep. That one's on. What about Snapdragon? That one is good to go too. Renegade Falls? The water's not on. High Roller? Yes. Space Spin? Oh yeah. Power Tower? They're doing the inspection this week. There was only one ride I really cared about. Mine and Brandon's favorite. What about Mayhem Mountain? Fuck. Yes, he answered to collective groans from the rest. Mayhem Mountain had always been our thing. The others had always been happy to ride the High Roller and the Snapdragon into exhaustion. Brandon and I always split off towards the end of the day to ride Mayhem Mountain into the twilight hours. Ugh, Charlotte shuddered. I hate that ride. It's boring as hell, Koji agreed. I helped design something similar for Disneyland Hong Kong. We put it in Fantasyland for fuck's sake. Hey, that ride is awesome. It's long and it goes upside down, I argued. Charlotte is even too scared to ride it. I'm not scared of that ride, it just gives me the creeps. Something about it, just, I don't know, seems off. Alright, look. We'll start at this end of the park and work our way towards the back. That way we can ride every ride that's passed inspection, including Mayhem Mountain, Brandon said. And Snapdragon, Tyler added, and the others nodded excitedly. Yes, every ride. And of course, we can ride them, as many times as we want. Hell yes, brother, Koji high-fived Brandon, and we headed down the street towards Space Spin. Our progress through the park was blissfully slow. Everyone wanted to ride the ride multiple times, and one person always had to stay in the loading area to operate the ride. It only took an hour or two to forget that I was a fully grown 35-year-old man. Being back here, running through the lineways with my friends, arguing who got the first row of the car, it was like being a 12-year-old again. Still, my eye was constantly drawn up over buildings into the distance, to the back of the park where the high, gleaming rails of Mayhem Mountain shined in the obscured sun. There would be no arguing who got the front row on that coaster. It was me and Brandon. It was always me and Brandon. Charlotte, Tyler, and Koji were the most like children, constantly running ahead and arguing over which ride to go next on, yelling back to ask Brandon if this one or that one had been cleared by the contractors. Brandon and I held back from the group a bit, discussing ideas and possible improvements for the park. Scott and Danny took up the rear of the group, quietly talking and lighting joints. When we arrived at the Enterprise, a simple ride that consisted on spinning cars on a circular track, I offered to flip the switch while the rest of the group rode to excess. The Enterprise always made me sick when we were kids. Brandon offered to stay on the platform with me to chat while everyone else rode the ride. I flipped the switch to turn on the ride, and as the cars spun away from the loading area, the Enterprise's signage came into view. I sighed. All day I had been trying to ignore the bright graffiti sprayed all over the park, but the words painted over the signage for the Enterprise were impossible to ignore. Where did the missing kids go? And the rest of the graffiti in the park was much the same. Most things said stuff like, "Where are they? Runaway Row. Find Ryan Kinski," and "The missing are now dead." Similar sayings could be found in a town sprayed across a few dilapidated buildings in the industrial district. Brandon's eyes avoided the sign, but I could tell he was thinking about it too. "Do you think the reason they shut down this park, do you see that being an issue for park attendants?" I asked, as casually as I could. Brandon was quiet for a few moments as he waited for the ride to slow to a stop so he could flip the switch again. "Nah, I don't think so. Low attendance issues aren't exactly what shut down the park." "They aren't?" This surprised me. "Nope. When we were negotiating the sale of the park, I was given access to the park's financials in the 80s. So they weren't operating at a loss? Oh, they were, but this park has operated in the red since opening day in the late 70s. Half of their revenue was being fed back into something called county services, whatever that is. The bank couldn't tell me, and believe me, I tried to find out." "County services," I mused. "Yep, bizarre. And according to the paperwork, the park was closed because the owner didn't want to live here anymore. And he couldn't be bothered to wait for a decent on the property, so he just sold it to the bank for next to nothing. So he was a rich guy?" I leaned back against the railing to stretch my back. "And an idiot?" "Yes, to an extreme in both cases. The owner of the park was Abel Bisset." "Abel Bisset? Related to that French billionaire, I'm guessing?" Brandon nodded. "Michael Bisset." "Michael Bisset. He built this park for his son in the 70s. Abel was never really what we would call business inclined. I've always heard him described as simple." I can't believe the son of a billionaire lives in this area. Well, not anymore. He moved on decades ago. I shook my head in disbelief. Who would ever have thought that our simple little park was owned by a famous billionaire's son? Hell, I may have even sat next to him on the rides and had no idea. You guys want to go again? Brandon yelled to the others as the ride came to a stop. I'm ready to move on, Koji yelled back. Anyone want to ride again? Nope, a chorus of voices replied. It was near 5 o'clock when we finally arrived at Mayhem Mountain. As the sun began to set, a familiar panic and urgency welled into the pit of my stomach. It took a moment for me to realize that we didn't have to leave the park closed this time, because the park didn't close. We could stay until sunup if we wanted to. As I eagerly approached the turnstile from Mayhem Mountain, Tyler spoke up behind me. Listen, can we run into town and grab something to eat before we ride Mayhem? You really want to ride Mayhem after we eat? Asked Koji. Good point. There's only one loop, Danny rolled her eyes. 2, I said. Don't forget the inline roll. Yep, 2, Scott answered. Plus it's a 2-minute ride. If your food isn't sitting well, you've got a long wait till it's over. Look, I said, let's ride it a couple of times and then go eat. When we come back, we'll see how we feel. Everyone nodded and we started walking through the lineways up to the platform. When we reached the loading dock, I was excited to see our favorite green car sitting on the track. Front seat, Brandon and I yelled simultaneously as the train cars came into view and everyone just behind us groaned. I'm staying here, Charlotte said. I'll just work the launch pad thingy. Still scared after all these years, Scott teased her. Shut up, Burnout. Scott laughed and tousled her hair before running and jumping into the first car behind Brandon and I. Danny got in next to him and then Tyler and Koji took the second car. We pulled the shoulder restraints down and they locked in place. Ready? Charlotte asked. Yep, Brandon yelled back. Send the car through. Charlotte pulled the lever and the brakes disengaged. As the car moved forwards, I turned to Brandon. Did we get the green car on purpose? I yelled to him as the coaster clacked around the load platform and began the clattery climb up the first lift hill. Yep, we sent cars through the gate here all morning, but I made sure Rich knew to leave the green machine in the loading bay. Awesome. As the train climbed up the lift hill, I made no attempt to hide my utter glee. I looked out over the expansive park and couldn't believe it was mine. Every track, every car, every turnstile, every screw. From the front gate to the overflow parking lot in the back, it was all ours. How I wished I could go back in time and tell a young me waiting in the 2-hour line for Mayhem Mountain, one day, you will own this place. And as we crested the hill and the train fell into the first drop, I realized I essentially had gone back in time. At least, I was screaming like a 12-year-old, as was everyone else behind me. We dipped into the first tester hill and then banked hard and up to the second lift hill. We dropped from there, down into the vertical loop, banked around a set of gift shops, up briefly, and then down a small hill into the inline roll. When we arrived back at the loading bay, we were all screaming and whooping. Charlotte didn't even have to ask, just smiled at us and sent us through again. We went twice more before we finally got off the ride. Koji walked over to check out the control panel while the rest of us taunted my sister. You sure you don't want to go, Char? It's awesome. Nah, I'm good. I have no problem being the carny for this ride, she laughed. Come on, Charlotte. Just one time. One time and we'll leave you alone, Tyler urged. No. No way, not interested. I'll ride anything else, though. Hey, Do you guys know what Track B is? Koji asked. Track B? What do you mean? Brendan walked over to Koji at the control board and raised an eyebrow. That's weird. It's probably just the track they use to get cars into the storage bay, Scott said with a shrug. No, Koji said. That's called a transfer track. Track B has to be something else. Yeah, well, I've been on this ride enough times to know that there is no other track. Yep, Tyler agreed with me. He has. So, should we try it? Brandon tested. Fuck no, said Charlotte. If you don't know what Track B is, then that means that the contractors don't know about it either, which means it hasn't been inspected in at least 20 years. That's suicide. Look, Koji said. If Track B exists, then even the most incompetent of engineers would have found it during an inspection. And Rich cleared this entire ride, Brandon nodded. It's probably just the ride in reverse. We're good. Well, we're in, announced Scott from the other side of the track, though Danny didn't look quite on board with the idea. Mark? Tyler asked. Yeah, I guess I'm in. What's the worst that could happen? We get funneled into a repair bay? Alright then, I'm in too, Tyler said hesitantly. Koji shrugged. Here goes nothing. He flipped the switch over to Track B, and a moment later, a loud metallic scraping some distance away filled the park. The sound lasted almost a minute. I studied the familiar silver roller coaster under the pink sky of the setting sun, but I saw no physical changes to the track. I looked over at Brandon, and a shrug of his shoulders told me he didn't either. Shall we? Scott asked, gesturing to the train cars we'd just disembarked. I gave Charlotte a questioning look, but she shook her head empathetically no. So it was just the six of us again. It's only right you two take the bow of the ship, Tyler gave a mock salute. Oh, captains, my captains. I laughed and hopped onto the right side of the front row. Brandon crawled into the seat next to me. Tyler and Koji got in behind us, and Scott and Danny took the back. We pulled the shoulder bars down, and they locked into place. Are you sure about this? Charlotte asked when everyone was settled. Danny said something from her place a few rows back, but all I heard was Brandon yelling, "Pull it."